They screwed me out of my pay, I screwed them out of their company. Many years ago, I got a job with a marketing company during phone deregulation. It was the Wild West and a lot of small long-distance companies sprang up, all trying to get a piece of the pie. Eventually they all got bought up by the bigger fish, but at the time they were all paying hired gun marketing firms very well to score contracts for them to lock people in. I got a job with one of those marketing firms, a new age capitalism company that insisted we all do yoga and breathing exercises while they rang a little bell and gave us affirmations about how many contracts we were all going to sell and how much money we'd all make. The job was 100% commission, but I was always good at sales, so I looked at the pay scale and noticed that it was exponential, presumably to entice people to work hard with impossible payouts. We were allowed to work as many or as few hours as we wanted, with the payout based on your weekly sales numbers. I decided I would give it a shot for 1 week to see how much I could realistically make before deciding whether I was willing to put up with the tasteless vegan snacks and mandatory voluntary yoga regime. For the next week, I pushed myself as hard as I could. For 7 straight days, I worked 14-plus-hour days every single day and used every trick and technique I had learned doing sales to score as many contracts as I possibly could. I figured this would tell me my maximum possible income and could decide on that basis whether to stay. At the end of the week, I had blown everyone else out of the water. In fact, I had not just gotten more contracts than anyone there had ever seen in a week, I had gotten more than any of them had seen in a month. Because of the exponential scale, I realized that I was making absolutely ridiculous amounts of money, $10,000 plus a week. They had never expected anyone could actually hit those kinds of numbers. Coming in the next week, expecting a huge payday, I ended up with about 5% of what I expected. They told me there were problems with a lot of my contracts, and that I would be allowed to fix them and submit them a few at a time over the next several weeks. These problems were things like an apostrophe wasn't quite clear or the dash in someone's phone number was slightly crooked. They were going to screw me. That night I got a phone call from the company's office manager, Frank, who wanted to meet up for a drink. Curious, I agreed. Over beers, Frank told me that the owners of the company were in a panic because I would have bankrupted them. He said they spread out all my contracts on the floor of the office, then they crawled over them, inspecting each one and trying to figure out if I was committing some kind of fraud. When they comprehended that all my contracts were legit, they decided they had no choice but to screw me over. Frank told me he realized at that point that if they would screw me, they'd screw him too, and, besides, he was tired of doing yoga. He asked me if I would be interested in going into business with him and go head-to-head with his bosses. I thought it sounded intriguing, but I asked him how he thought we could compete. Frank explained that he had found out they didn't actually have the contract for our city. They were acting as independent contractors for another company who had the contract to market the service in an entirely different city. They were poaching here because the person who did have the contract wasn't actively using it. We put together a pitch and approached the guy with the real contract, Joe, and told him about the people poaching his turf. We agreed that we'd split with him, we'd take the upfront money for each contract, and he'd get the back-end money down the road. It was a good deal for everyone, so Joe contacted the phone company and had them threaten the poachers with a big lawsuit if they didn't stop. A week later, Frank and I strolled into the offices of our old employer. Most of the furniture, and all the yoga mats, was gone, and there was just a table, a couple of filing cabinets, and a file box with the final pay envelopes for everyone. I made a show of counting my money to make sure it was all there, and the two owners, husband and wife, told Frank and I bitterly that they'd had to take cash advances on their credit cards for this money, and asked me if I felt guilty for destroying their lives. I smiled and said, nope, and left. Our marketing company made us a lot of money over the year until the company got bought up by Sprint and the gravy train ended. Tell others I hit my dog, see what's coming for you. Me and my husband, 28F, 29M, are in a chicken breeding club, which provides an allotment garden-like structure. We joined a year ago and got to know Klaus, an old man who actually lives in one of those said gardens. At first, he was very kind, helped out 1 or 2 times. But after a while, he got very greedy, telling us to help him in his garden, selling stuff for him on eBay, or care for his chickens. Some people said we should keep our distance from him, but we didn't listen. He regularly invited us to drink a beer with him, acted like he knew all of town, is well known and has many connections. But the real thing was, yes, he was known, but for all the bad reasons. We talked to him a lot in the first few months, noticed he's highly addicted to alcohol, and tries to make a dime out of everyone and everything. You know the saying, blood is thicker than water? Not for him, lol. At first he helped us out, for example, with giving us some tools for free or giving us money for working over at his place. Also, we kind of felt bad for him. Living your last days in a garden shed? But after a while, he gave us near to nothing for our work. No money, broken tools, so garbage we had to dispose of, not even a thank you. He also started to talk to us in a very demanding tone. Old male Karen-like. Instead of messing with him, we started to simply distance us from him, not doing any more work. His last effort to win us back was to buy 20 weed plants and putting them in his garden and showing us he knew we smoked. But as soon as he demanded we sell his future 5 kilos, we backed off again. As others noticed, we didn't hang out with him anymore. They started to tell us how Klaus truly is. He started to live there, as soon as another club member, since dead, lost his home and lived on his farm over there. As for the rules of the club, it's not allowed. If he is allowed to, Klaus had to be too. Klaus lived there for 14 years, not because he got homeless or another stroke of bad luck in life, because he wanted to live as inexpensive as possible. We learned he had loads of debt. No wonder, considering how much he drank. We found out this is the case since he was old enough to drink. He tried to rip everyone off their money, since ever. His brother, his best friend, even his wife. Some say if she was still alive, he would sell his own mother. As the weeks went by, we learned more and more about him, that he had done this with nearly everyone who joined the club, not only with us. We saw it too, as a new member, who's also mentally disabled, cut his hedge for him for 16 hours, and got $20. And no thank you. Klaus started to dislike the way we stayed out of his way, so his response to that was to talk crap about us, even threatened us to tell others that we smoke illegal over here. I mean real full-fledged lies. For example, we would owe him $200, we would do parties till late at night at the farm, we would hit our dogs. At that last point, we snapped. We bought a drone, made pictures of his weed plants, and got police involved. Get them before they get you, lol. Klaus peacefully sat in the club's community house, drinking beer, 9 o'clock in the morning, as 10 police officers walked in, going directly into his garden. Little Klaus turned his head around like an owl and immediately stood up and walked outside. He asked one cop, "Hi, can I help you?" and they asked for his name. "Oh, Mr. Klaus, we were actually looking for you," behind the officer talking to him. The other cops raided his farm, not only finding the plants, but discovered themselves he lives there, living room with obviously used bed, food leftovers, a TV. They asked him where he has his address. He told them the address of his long-deceased brother. They sent a car to this address, but found no clue he could be living there. By the way, he also got money from the state, social benefits, also meant to cover his rent. The rent on this farm is $30/year. So huge no, money fraud is one of the worst things you could do over here. The cops stayed at his farm for the next 4 hours, collecting evidence. The whole farm surroundings were patrolled by some cops, so word spread like a wildfire. Every single farm owner got over there to see what was happening, cheering that this douche finally got what was coming for him after ripping off so many people. It was amazing. This dude had 14 years to make this farm his little hidey hole, making money out of it. He had split the whole community, gave us a bad name overall, and not even breeding chickens. He just had them to sell the eggs SMH. To his luck, he was clever enough to tell the cops it's only CBD, still illegal, but not as much, so they had to send it in to test it, buying him some time. The club held a meeting. That was a shit show. As soon as this topic started, he said we planted them there, he only gave us the little plot. Most laughed, some said nothing. We voted for his eviction, had to, as of the rules. He got 15 against him, just 3 voted for him to stay. So, our revenge is not over yet.